What if the real problem at Ferrari is not the car, but the culture? As Lewis Hamilton quietly exposes the systematic favoritism behind closed garage doors, fans and insiders alike are forced to ask, has Ferrari sacrificed fair competition to protect Charles Leclerc's ego? And if so, how long can a team built on legends survive while silencing the voice of a seven-time world champion? The silence from Maranello speaks volumes, but Hamilton's data might just be louder. The walls of secrecy inside Ferrari's Maranello headquarters have always been legendary, fortified by decades of tradition, innovation, and competitive paranoia. Yet, what unfolded this past week may have pierced that armor in a way few expected. In a move that has set the entire Formula One community on edge, Hamilton, known as much for his strategic mind as for his skill behind the wheel, has effectively pulled back the curtain on what Ferrari engineers had internally referred to as their game changer. It began innocently enough. Whispers in the paddock about subtle aerodynamic tweaks and sensor revisions spotted on the rear of the car during simulator sessions. But it was Hamilton's post-test debrief, delivered with surgical calm, that turned speculation into revelation. According to internal sources, Hamilton outlined in striking detail how the new floor upgrade, originally tested discreetly weeks prior, was designed not for general performance enhancement, but to specifically complement Leclerc's driving style. The upgraded design subtly altered downforce levels at corner entry, benefiting drivers who brake deeper and rotate the car aggressively, traits associated more with Leclerc than with Hamilton. The bombshell? Hamilton's data showed that while the upgrade offered marginal gains for one driver, it created instability for another. And yet, despite this critical insight, the part was pushed forward in development without dual driver optimization. His statements during the debrief were not an accusation, they were a data-backed diagnosis. And they hit the team like a shockwave. While Ferrari management tried to downplay the comments, suggesting all development paths are tested equally, telemetry data told a different story. Independent analysts confirmed the asymmetric benefits. Moreover, insiders revealed that Hamilton had spent considerable time with the simulation team, running his own adjusted configurations to propose alternate upgrades. His approach was methodical, rooted not in frustration, but in a commitment to accuracy. He did not simply reject the new part, he exposed its purpose. And in doing so, he exposed the team's inner logic, upgrades that were not universal but selective. What this suggests is something far more complicated than a technical disagreement. It points to a culture within Ferrari where favoritism may be influencing development pipelines. For Hamilton, a driver who built his legacy on merit, precision, and adaptability, this revelation was more than a professional disagreement. It was a message. Performance should dictate development, not politics. The fact that he was the one to surface these details, rather than internal leadership, has sparked a new level of tension. Not just within the team, but across the paddock. In the days following Hamilton's revelations, a noticeable unease spread through the technical offices at Ferrari. What had previously been considered harmless internal optimization now felt like the beginning of a philosophical rift within the team's core. Engineers who had spent months fine-tuning the so-called game-changer upgrade were reportedly split. Some standing firmly behind its targeted design philosophy, while others privately admitted that the package was rolled out too soon and with too narrow a scope. The most unsettling realization for many inside the team was not that Hamilton had noticed the imbalance, but that he had understood it so thoroughly. He had not just seen it from behind the wheel, he had broken it down, interpreted it, and exposed the intention behind its creation. This level of insight reminded many of Hamilton's early years at Mercedes, where his technical feedback became the blueprint for some of the team's most dominant cars. It was not the first time he had acted as more than a driver, it was a pattern. And in a team like Ferrari, which has historically struggled to maintain a balance between its legacy and modernity, such a presence is both valuable and threatening. For Leclerc, the implications were just as delicate. While he had publicly praised the upgrade as a step forward, he now faced a new wave of scrutiny. Was his rise in performance a product of raw talent, or of car development designed to fit him like a glove? Meanwhile, the press began digging deeper. Independent technical observers studying onboard footage from recent tests noted how the car's behavior changed under heavy braking, how the rear end seemed to settle better under Leclerc, while Hamilton fought with slight snap oversteer at similar speeds. These observations, once brushed aside as normal driver variants, were now seen in the context of a deliberate design choice. Even former champions weighed in. One ex-driver, speaking anonymously, remarked, "If one side of the garage is being given tools to shine, and the other is expected to make do, that's not engineering, that's orchestration." Internally, the response from Hamilton's camp was calm but calculated. He reportedly met with senior team members to propose a revised development path that included symmetrical testing phases for all upgrades moving forward. His tone, according to those present, was firm but devoid of drama. He did not ask for special treatment, only equal treatment. And perhaps that was the most damning part of the entire episode. A 7-time world champion having to remind a legendary team about the basics of competitive fairness. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. In a garage painted red with history, Hamilton stood not as an outsider, but as the standard. As the fallout from Hamilton's exposure of the upgrade intensified, the atmosphere inside Ferrari shifted from uneasy to strained. Engineers began to re-examine not just the recent data, but the entire technical trajectory of the season. Documents from previous simulator runs were quietly reviewed, and some mechanics were seen double-checking telemetry from earlier races. Not out of paranoia, but out of a growing desire to understand how such a critical imbalance had gone unnoticed for so long. In whispered conversations over coffee and within closed-door engineering meetings, a troubling consensus was beginning to form. The game changer had not simply failed to benefit both drivers equally. It may have been designed with only one in mind. What made Hamilton's revelation so incendiary was not just their accuracy, but their restraint. He had not resorted to public accusation or emotional commentary. Instead, he had laid out his case with the clarity of a strategist. That subtlety made the implications even more powerful. Within the team, several mid-level engineers reportedly voiced frustration that their concerns about the floor upgrade had been dismissed during earlier development stages. One even admitted that when the initial design favored Leclerc's braking pattern, the expectation was that Hamilton would adapt, as he had always done. But in this case, adaptation was not enough. The physics of the car had been tuned to a bias, and now, thanks to Hamilton, that bias was out in the open. Across the paddock, rival teams watched the internal tension unfold with curiosity and concern. At Red Bull, technical director Pierre Vache commented off the record that Ferrari's handling of the upgrade was surprisingly transparent, but only after they were forced into it. Meanwhile, at Mercedes, a few familiar faces from Hamilton's title-winning years quietly reached out, offering support and, according to some rumors, even technical comparisons from older seasons where Hamilton's feedback had resolved similar challenges. This network of respect, built over years of data-driven excellence, now stood in contrast to the opaque choices being made in Maranello. But perhaps the most interesting response came from within Ferrari's own fanbase. Social media lit up with side-by-side data charts, amateur analysis of throttle inputs, and slow-motion breakdowns of both drivers' corner entries. A growing number of fans, many of whom had celebrated Leclerc's rise without question, were beginning to ask if the team had, in their pursuit of a future star, begun to forget the value of the legend already in their garage. Has Ferrari's future obsession blinded them to Hamilton's present-day brilliance? The question lingered like smoke in the air. And for a team already under pressure to deliver results, the growing narrative of preferential treatment risked becoming not just a distraction, but a crisis of identity. Within the walls of Maranello, where tradition and innovation have long existed in uneasy balance, the aftermath of Hamilton's exposure continued to send shockwaves. The senior leadership at Ferrari held a series of emergency strategy sessions, not just to address the technical shortcomings of the game-changer upgrade, but to re-evaluate the chain of command in their development process. For years, the team had prided itself on a collective philosophy. Every decision, every innovation, was said to pass through a democratic corridor of engineers, designers, and simulation experts. But the incident with the biased floor design exposed a crack in that ideal. If decisions were indeed being skewed toward one driver's preferences without sufficient testing balance, then it was not only a matter of engineering failure, it was an institutional flaw. Sources inside the team revealed that Hamilton had once again taken the high road during these discussions. He did not speak in anger, nor demand retribution. Instead, he presented a detailed dossier, composed over several sleepless nights, outlining not just the flaws in the current upgrade, but the risks of continuing on a development path that prioritized internal hierarchy over measurable performance. The dossier reportedly included comparisons from previous seasons where similar scenarios played out in other teams, often leading to fractures that became irreparable. He did not name names, but the message was unmistakable. This was not just about a floor upgrade. It was about principle, parity, and the soul of competition. At the same time, whispers of division within the garage began to take a firmer shape. While publicly united, certain members of the team were now seen aligning themselves more distinctly with either Hamilton or Leclerc. Mechanics who had previously worked fluidly between both cars began to gravitate toward one driver. Performance engineers found themselves defending data sets that had once been accepted without question. What was once a harmonious ecosystem had begun to tilt, slowly but undeniably, toward a divided culture, one where loyalty was becoming more personal than professional. Meanwhile, in the wider motorsport community, Hamilton's handling of the situation was being hailed as a masterclass in driver leadership. Veteran commentators praised his maturity, noting how his approach was less about confrontation and more about accountability. Younger drivers, both in Formula 2 and junior testing programs, reportedly began using Hamilton's debrief as a study case in how to challenge a team constructively. It was not just about driving fast, it was about understanding the machinery, the politics, and the quiet battles that shape a career. What makes this saga so significant is that it goes beyond performance. Hamilton's exposure of Ferrari's upgrade bias has forced the entire paddock to confront a truth they often ignore: that sometimes the biggest obstacles a driver faces are not rivals on the track, but the decisions made behind the scenes. In this case, a legend in red is not just fighting for podiums. He is fighting for balance in a machine that was designed to be equal, but is proving to be anything but. As the tension thickened in Maranello, a subtle yet profound shift began to ripple through the culture of Ferrari. For a team that has always carried the weight of its mythos, the red cars, the tifosi, the long shadows of legends past, there was now an unspoken realization that perhaps the institution had lost touch with the very values it was built upon. The game-changer upgrade, once heralded internally as a masterstroke of aerodynamic intelligence, had morphed into a symbol of something deeper: the dangerous consequences of favoritism disguised as progress. And at the center of this unraveling stood Hamilton, calm, deliberate, and increasingly viewed not as an outsider disrupting the system, but as the lone figure keeping it honest. Team insiders have suggested that Hamilton's push for parity has triggered an internal audit across multiple departments. Not only are the current car components under renewed scrutiny, but also the processes that allowed a one-sided upgrade to move forward without challenge. In particular, the simulator team, traditionally a key pillar of technical validation, has come under pressure to explain how such a substantial handling difference went undetected. Some argue it was noticed but politically inconvenient to highlight. Others say it was downplayed in the hope that Hamilton would adapt, as he so often has. But the truth, as always in Formula 1, lies in the data, and Hamilton brought receipts. In team meetings, he was reportedly surgical, presenting telemetry overlays that highlighted not only discrepancies in how the car handled under high-speed lateral load, but also how the balance shifted dramatically under DRS deployment. His findings suggested that the upgrade increased rear grip in ways that amplified the strengths of Leclerc's driving style, stable, corner-entry focused, but left Hamilton contending with a nervous front end, unpredictable mid-corner behavior, and reduced confidence in long-run simulations. For any other driver, such nuances might have been chalked up to preference. But when it is a driver with Hamilton's resume and analytical depth, those nuances become warnings. Publicly, Ferrari has remained reserved, issuing bland statements about ongoing assessments and internal dialogue. But privately, leadership is now caught between two incompatible narratives: one in which the team is unified and developing fairly, and another where certain voices carry more weight than others. And with Hamilton's revelations now firmly in the public sphere, pretending neutrality is no longer an option. The world is watching. Every future upgrade, every subtle comment in a press conference, will now be interpreted through the lens of this controversy. For Leclerc, this new reality is equally precarious. While he has not been accused of manipulating the situation, the optics are undeniably uncomfortable. Even his most loyal supporters have begun to question whether his recent pace advantage was more mechanical than magical. It is a complicated position. He may not have asked for preferential treatment, but he certainly benefited from it. And in a team as storied and political as Ferrari, that kind of benefit rarely comes without a cost. In the corridors of Maranello, where silence often speaks louder than statements, the unease has grown impossible to conceal. What began as a technical disagreement has spiraled into a broader crisis of trust, between drivers, between engineers, and most dangerously, between Ferrari and the ideals it claims to uphold. For Hamilton, this chapter is not just a moment of technical frustration. It has become a philosophical battleground. The car is no longer just a tool for performance. It is a mirror reflecting the values of the team behind it. And right now, that reflection is cracked. The most troubling consequence of the situation is not the underperformance itself, but the institutional refusal to acknowledge that it was engineered. As insiders began leaking fragments of internal emails and Slack discussions, it became increasingly clear that certain factions within the development team had long considered Hamilton's input secondary. Not out of malice, but out of inertia. In a setup where Leclerc had become the face of the future, the default assumption became, build the car around him, and let the rest fall into place. But Hamilton is not just another driver. He is a multi-time world champion with an encyclopedic grasp of racecraft, tire behavior, and aerodynamic feedback. To sideline that knowledge is not just disrespectful. it is strategically reckless. In recent days, a quiet rebellion has taken root among the data analysts and simulation engineers. Several have begun privately sharing adjusted modeling scenarios with Hamilton, tweaking the upgrade parameters to neutralize the imbalance. These clandestine efforts, though unofficial, speak to the depth of concern within the organization. One engineer, speaking anonymously, said, "We have a weapon in Hamilton, and we are pointing it at the wrong targets." It is a sentiment growing louder by the day. Meanwhile, Hamilton has kept his public demeanor composed, almost surgical. He continues to speak in calm, clipped tones during press engagements, choosing facts over drama. But behind closed doors, he is said to be pressing harder than ever, requesting deeper simulation runs, insisting on his own test sessions, and demanding a re-evaluation of the internal sign-off process for upgrades. Not because he craves favoritism, but because he refuses to be the victim of it. His philosophy has become clear. Equality is not a slogan, it is a standard. And when that standard is betrayed, it must be corrected, whether through data, diplomacy, or direct confrontation. At the same time, there is growing speculation about how far Hamilton is willing to go. Rumors swirl in the paddock that should Ferrari fail to rectify the imbalance, he may consider escalating the matter directly to the FIA's technical committee. Not to punish, but to set a precedent. After all, what is the point of having the most scrutinized sport in the world, if internal politics are allowed to quietly override engineering ethics? The questions continue to mount, and with each passing day, Ferrari risks losing not just a driver, but a symbol of credibility in an era when integrity matters more than ever. The road ahead is no longer just a track, it is a test of conscience. The reverberations of Hamilton's silent rebellion are now being felt beyond Maranello. Across the paddock, rival teams have begun to observe Ferrari's turmoil not with glee, but with quiet calculation. The notion that one of the most experienced and analytically gifted drivers in the sport could be systematically marginalized has triggered concern among team principals, technical directors, and even the FIA. If such a scenario can unfold in Ferrari, a team with seemingly endless resources and heritage, what does that say about the governance of engineering equity throughout the grid? Meanwhile, journalists and analysts have turned their attention toward archived team radio logs and internal press briefings from earlier in the season. In hindsight, several moments now appear loaded with subtext. A strangely delayed response from Hamilton's race engineer when asked about tire degradation during testing in Barcelona. A vague explanation during a debrief about aerodynamic balance that appeared to contradict visual trackside data. And most telling of all, a cryptic remark by LECLER about trusting the path we have chosen. A statement that, at the time, seemed benign, but now reeks of engineered partiality. Within Ferrari, the internal split has hardened. On one side are those who believe in legacy, who see Leclerc as the natural heir to the Scuderia's future, the poster boy of their red resurgence. On the other, a growing faction stands behind Hamilton, not just out of loyalty, but out of respect for method and merit. These engineers, strategists, and mechanics argue that the heart of innovation lies in critical feedback, not in hero worship. To them, Hamilton is not a threat to unity. He is a firewall against complacency. The leadership, particularly team principal Frédéric Vasseur, now finds itself at a crossroads. The decision is not about siding with one driver over another. It is about reasserting control over a development structure that has clearly drifted toward imbalance. Insiders report that Vasseur has recently begun attending technical meetings he once delegated to subordinates, and that the chain of command for future upgrades will now include a driver feedback panel, something Hamilton has long advocated for. Yet, whether these changes are genuine reforms or just political bandages remains to be seen. Off the track, Hamilton's stance has begun to resonate with a broader audience. Fan forums, long divided between Red loyalists and Hamilton supporters, are now engaging in rare moments of agreement. Excellence, regardless of branding, deserves fairness. His followers admire the grace with which he has handled the adversity. Even many longtime Ferrari fans are beginning to voice frustration, not with the drivers, but with a system that risks devouring its own potential. Ultimately, this saga has grown beyond engineering or even sport. It is now about principles, about how a team, any team, defines success. Is it measured by lap times alone, or by the integrity of the process that leads there? And if a champion like Hamilton must fight his own team for equal footing, what does that say about the state of Formula One in 2025? In the final analysis, Hamilton's experience at Ferrari in 2025 may come to symbolize a turning point, not only in his career, but in the culture of Formula One itself. What began as a quiet technical anomaly has evolved into a compelling case study in leadership, ethics, and the fragile balance between talent and treatment. Behind the speed and spectacle lies a fundamental truth. Machinery alone does not win championships, humans do. And when those humans feel unseen or undervalued, even the most advanced upgrades can become irrelevant. The weight of this story is not just in the details of telemetry or aerodynamic setups. It is in what they reveal about the state of a team that once defined greatness. That Ferrari, with its infinite resources and institutional memory, could allow internal favoritism to quietly shape the development of its machinery is a wake-up call to the sport at large. No team, no matter how historic, is immune to politics. But when those politics start distorting performance under the guise of strategy, it becomes a betrayal, not only to the drivers but to the millions of fans who invest in the narrative of fair competition. Hamilton, for his part, has not asked for sympathy, nor has he thrown accusations carelessly. What he has done is more subversive and arguably more powerful. He has trusted the data. Every assertion, every doubt he has raised, has come backed by precision and patience. He has allowed the truth to reveal itself in the cold logic of corner speeds, throttle traces, and setup differentials. And now that the public and internal scrutiny has caught up to that truth, it can no longer be ignored. There is, however, a strange beauty in the way Hamilton has navigated this storm. He has neither begged for allegiance nor threatened departure. He has done what true competitors do. He has remained focused. Focused on understanding the car, on guiding the team, and on maintaining a level of professionalism that puts pressure on Ferrari without ever resorting to theatrics. It is that consistency, both in behavior and in insight, that has made his stance so unshakable. The next chapter, of course, remains unwritten. Whether Ferrari embraces reform or clings to its current hierarchies will determine not just the future of its season, but potentially its legacy in this era of Formula One. What is certain is that the sport has been reminded, again, that champions are not made only by standing on podiums. Sometimes they are made in silence, in meetings, in data analysis sessions that reshape the very way a team sees itself. Hamilton may not have lifted a trophy in Monaco or Imola this season, but he has done something arguably more difficult. He has exposed a flaw from within and challenged it with dignity. And in doing so, he may have gifted Ferrari its greatest upgrade yet, not to the car, but to its conscience.